There's been a big difference in Colorado football ever since Deion Sanders took over. We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba, and joining me today is a special guest, Mark Johnson, the voice of Colorado. Mark, how you doing? Appreciate you coming on.
You bet, Kevin. Good to be on with you. Yeah, anytime I can talk about the Buffaloes, it's a good day. And obviously with what Coach Prime is doing right now, we're living in a different world, man. It's his world, and I'm just renting space in it.
Yeah, it's a totally different world, and I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you guys making Locked On Buffs your first listen of the day. I appreciate Mark for joining us, and we're going to talk about what Mark just alluded to. You've been around the Buffs program for 19 years, correct?
Correct. Yeah, just finished my 19th season. Let's see, August 1st will be actually the anniversary of that. So next year is number 20 for me.
There we go. Next year coming up on 2 decades covering the Buffs. Okay, let's talk about the difference in Coach Prime presence as just in general as a head coach, his presence as a polarizing figure, just media coverage. Obviously, this podcast wasn't a thing before he was there, so there's been a lot of more attention on the program. And so give us a little insight as someone who's been there from, I guess you could say, day one of the year 2000, almost the 2000s.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I got here my first 2 years for Gary Barnett's last 2 years. And now, of course, he's my broadcast partner. So, things kind of come full circle. So I've seen a lot, in the last 2 decades here in Colorado. Kevin, this is unlike anything that I've ever seen or anybody has ever seen. I made the comment when Coach Prime got hired back in early December. I was doing a shot at ESPN, and I said, this guy's one of one. Not only is he a coach, but he's one of the handful of greatest athletes of all time. I mean, whatever you want to put in that conversation, he's going to be in it. Bo Jackson, Jim Thorpe, whoever it might be, he's going to be in that conversation. Then on top of it, he's a cultural icon. And I said at that day on that interview, I said, I don't think that Rick George could have hired anybody else that would have brought the same gravitas, the same attention, the same, spectacle that what Coach Prime has brought. And the host said to me, "You're kidding me. There's nobody else out there." And I said, "Well, really, if you hire, Nick Saban, you're hiring one of the greatest coaches of all time, but he doesn't bring the cultural aspect that Coach Prime does." I said, maybe the only other person that might be able to do it, and maybe if they hired Oprah Winfrey, maybe she brings the same kind of attention that Coach Prime does. But yeah, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And you're seeing it every single day. You cover this program. I mean, It's donations, it's season ticket sales. The spring game's going to be a sellout. It's sponsorships. It's endorsements. It's everything. There was that 1 week where, let's see, on a Monday night, he was on the national championship pregame show, right? When TCU was playing against, I just totally forget. Ohio State, correct?
Georgia.
Beg your pardon, Georgia. It's been a long time. He's on the pregame show for that contest. And then the next morning, he's on CBS Morning News. He's in the New York Times. He's on the cover of GQ magazine. And then the following Monday, he was on the Manning cast for the Monday night game in the NFL. I mean, there's no other coach in America that brings that kind of attention to a program like he does. So this thing is totally unique. Colorado went from potentially and arguably the least relevant program in America at the end of the season last year, 1-11, and it was a bad 1-11. And now they're maybe the most relevant program in college football. And I don't think there's anybody else in the country who could have done that.
Yeah, and to touch on the popularity of someone else trying to take over and bring in the same energy, I was thinking, doing a little exercise in my head while you were talking, I was like, who would bring in all this attention? Right. There's no names out there. There's none in the college football world. Nick Saban would kind of be the only one that comes to mind, but he hates attention, so he's not going to be out there at the Super Bowl week doing every radio show in sight. And then when we talk to recruits, one of them actually told us that they think Coach Prime is the coolest coach in college football. And I think it's kind of emulated in all of his journeys and outside things that he does. And he always finds a way to tie it into Colorado like he did at the Super Bowl. And so it's definitely been surreal to see from, I guess, an outside perspective. And I think another thing that a lot of people would want to get an insight into is how has the energy on the campus changed? Because I know the students always been supportive. I think they stormed the field during their 1 win last year, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And love the spirit, But how has that energy been magnified from 1-11 to the excitement of possibly being a national power.
Well, Kevin, think of this for a second. So the other night there was a McDonald's All-American game, right? And Cody Williams, who's the highest-rated buff recruited to Colorado in basketball since David Harrison back in the early 2000s. He just preceded me here. And Cody Williams is asked about coming to Colorado and Coach Prime being there. And he talked about the fact that he's excited about it and it energizes the campus. So to, I guess, amplify your point, it's affected every aspect of the campus. Students are ecstatic about it. When I'm on campus, covering spring ball right now, you can't walk 10 feet without see somebody, wearing a Prime jersey or a Prime, sweatshirt or hat or whatever it might be. I mean, it's everywhere. And just the fact that, and I got to ask this question the other day, by the way, when we mentioned that the spring game is going to be a sellout. And somebody asked me, well, what's the biggest crowd you've seen, in your 19 seasons? So I've covered 18 spring games since I've been here. And I thought, I might be wrong here, but it seems to me it's 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, maybe. So you're talking about 1/5 of the stadium being filled, and now you're talking about a sellout, which has never happened in Colorado. And I think that right there speaks to what you're asking about.
Yeah, and for reference, the stadium holds around 50,000 people and change. So we're seeing about a 42,000 person increase. I do think it's safe to say that if Colorado had uniforms for their students, they'd probably all agree on Coach Prime issued gear. Before we move on to our next topic, I want you guys to know the tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now FanDuel is giving customers a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on anything from money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all in our app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. I know as a California native, I have to go with San Diego State. I was riding with Texas, but they let me down. So now I got to shift gears and just ride with the state. But back to the important stuff. One of the big things that Coach Prime has done, and he said he was going to do it. It was one of the first ways he made headlines, the first of many ways. He told last year's roster he was bringing his own baggage, and it was Louis. And he basically was urging them to hit the portal because he wanted to flip the roster, which, depending on how you receive it, doesn't matter. It's business, how college football works. Tell me about the new roster and all of the new faces that you're trying to learn and just how it looks in spring practice compared to years of the past.
That video you're referencing, when he talked to the team for the first time about that, I took it a little bit differently than a lot of people did. I didn't take what he was saying as hit the portal and get out of here. I took it as him saying, listen, you guys are 1-11 before I got here. And like I said earlier, it was a bad 1-11. Mm-hmm. This is where the bar is. This is where the bar is going to be. If you can clear that bar, you're welcome to stay here. But this is where we're going to compete. And so I took that as a challenge to the guys who are out there. Now the guys who have remained here and are in the spring bowl right now from last year's team are, we just saw the other day, Charlie Offerdahl was making plays like crazy the last practice they had before spring break, which is happening, right now. So there are guys out there that are raising their level of play and wanting to meet this challenge. So I'm excited to see which one of those guys or how many of those guys can actually raise their game and play the level that Prime wants them to. Now, as for the roster, I told this on a couple of other shows. I got on the elevator one day in the Champion Center here the last couple of weeks, and about 5 or 6, 7 guys got on the elevator with me. They're all football players. It was right after practice. And I looked around and thought, I don't know any single face on this elevator right now. There whatever there is. It's, with the recruiting classes coming in, it's something like 45 or 47 new guys are on the roster by the time we get around to August. A good chunk of them being all the transfers are here right now. And so it's an entirely reworked roster as it stands right now. And we fully expect when spring break or spring ball rather is over, you're going to see more guys jump in the portal from their respective schools. And I'd expect Prime to grab some more guys out there if he's looking to fill, still some of the holes that he feels he has. So, what are we talking about by the time we get to August? Could it be 60, 70 players that might be new on this roster to totally flip that roster? And so that's exciting. I will tell you this. I was out there with a former Buff, who's an NFL guy, the other day. We're standing there looking at the roster. I said, what do you think? And he said, well, I don't know what we're going to look like on the field. I can tell you right now, the raw material looks a whole lot better than it has in a long, long time. And so there are a lot of bodies out there that look the way they're supposed to look. They run the way they're supposed to run. I did an interview with Jimmy Horn Jr. last week, who I think is going to be a star for Colorado. Those are the kind of athletes that we can go through Shador and, Travis Hunter and all the guys that he's brought in. Those are high-level athletes that Prime has brought in, and that's why there's a lot of excitement and should be a lot of excitement around this team.
Yeah, we talked about it, I want to say 2 weeks ago. We did bold predictions, and one of my bold predictions was that he was not done in the transfer portal. I think that even though he's already brought in 30-odd transfers or whatever the number is, I don't know the number off the top of my head, I think there's always room for improvement, and there's always going to be guys from, say, Oklahoma, Alabama, Tennessee, wherever it may be, that they didn't like the role that they had during spring practice. They didn't like the new system that they could have been in at wherever they're at. And then they hit the portal. And Coach Prime has obviously been the popular attraction in the portal. And I think he works well under just a short period of time. It's kind of weird to say, but when he has no time, that's prime time, if you will. I look at Travis Hunter's recruitment when he was at Jackson State. Cormani McClain came down to the wire. Even the transfer portal, when he first took the job, he had 200 people reach out to him. I think he just thrives under having minimal time, and he's had people commit without even visiting. And so the appeal is there. And like you mentioned, Jimmy Horn and all the guys that are bringing in a new level of athlete, I think it's an exciting thing for Colorado fans to kind of, I don't want to say that they didn't have elite athletes, because obviously if you play Division I football, you're a good athlete, but
sure.
They're bringing in guys that had SEC offers, SEC experience. Jimmy Horn was one of the most sought after talents out of South Florida. My co-host John is out of Miami, and so he was talking about Jimmy Horn's recruitment as a transfer, and it was like Texas A&M, SEC schools, SEC all over the place, and Coach Prime got him to come to Colorado. So when you're trying to learn the roster now, because there's so many new faces, are you just hoping that they start patching on those little "Hello, my name is Jimmy" name tags, or what?
That's about it. I always tell people, they ask about, how tough it is to play by play. I said, well, it's not easy. But the good news is I always know the Buffaloes, right? I always know that team. I've been doing it for so long. Now, for a number of years, I did a lot of national stuff. And then every week you'd have to get ready for two teams, right? Because you didn't know them. And that's the way I feel going into spring ball. And it'll be that way going into the first game at TCU because there's so many new players on the roster. That happens pretty quickly. But you're right. I mean, it's going to be most years by the time you get to the spring game. Oh, heck. I mean, I know every single guy out there, and I don't think twice about it. At least you're going to have to check the roster while we're doing the play-by-play. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. Yeah, that's a good thing, though, Kevin. No doubt.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have new faces and new talent. Me and you, we're going to have little flashcards. Same thing when I cover Stanford. There's so many people that have left the roster. I'm like, like when I'm looking at guys just walking around, I'm like, okay. And then I got to go on the roster and look at the pictures. I'm like, okay, that's who that is.
And by the way, it's really hard right now at spring ball because there's no numbers out there. Right. Right. Because we don't. Prime took those away. They've got to earn them back. And so when I'm standing out there at one of the spring practices looking out the field, now they do have their name patches on the back of the jersey, but you can't see those from when I'm standing, off the playing surface. So I'm looking out there going, I have no idea who that guy is. Nope, don't know him either. There's 3 or 4 that I'm getting to know. But yeah, that's the fun part about this. And that's why when you talk about expectations, I'm not even sure what to think half the time, Kevin, because everything's so brand new. I mean, you talk about every aspect of this program is brand new. It's tough to kind of, I don't know how Vegas is going to do it this upcoming season because I'm not sure what they're basing anything on other than, kind of speculation.
Well, yeah, the only thing that we know about Vegas for sure right now, and I wrote about this a few weeks ago, is that a lot of people are betting on Colorado for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And hey, I mean, spend your money however you will, but there was a lot of Colorado national championship bets that I saw, and I was a little surprised by that. But that's the energy. Before we move on, again, you guys, it is the Built Bar March Madness, and the bracket is here, so we all know you have a favorite bar or puff. And now's your time to make it count. Go to Built Bar March Madness to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the coconut bar / puff. That's my favorite. And if you want your favorite team to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff. And when you vote, your favorite bar or puff will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built's the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing. You won't even think they're good for you. What makes Built bars and puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, the real stuff, not that fake stuff. Run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pack. Support your pick and your pack, whatever it may be. Okay, now we got to talk about the season. I think we've seen a lot of fans emerge for Colorado, which is exciting. But with fans, and we talk about this all the time in this podcast, and I'm often viewed as a pessimistic person because I bring up both sides of things. There's going to be fans, and then there's going to be negativity. I think the first time Colorado loses a game or Deion Sanders throws an interception, social media is going to take it and run with it more than they ever would have for, say, a JT Shrout or a Brendan Lewis. It just doesn't have the same cachet, if you will. So this upcoming season, what are your expectations for just the overall attention and the season itself?
Well, the first thing you got to remember about what you talked about there off the top is that, and I say this all the time of the year, fans see with their hearts and not with their eyes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're fans. And that's a good thing, right? That's why you do what you do and I do what I do. And we have listeners on the Colorado Football Network and they love the program. They buy the jerseys and all that kind of stuff. That's a good thing. And so for Buff Nation out there, which has been terribly starved for success, well, certainly during my 20 years here, with the exception of 2016, not much good has happened, right? I mean, I've called 2004, 2005. Those were the only two winning seasons until we got to 2016, which was a wonderful campaign with Philip Lindsay and Seppo Lufau and Mike McIntyre and that whole group. That was a great year. But outside of that, there hasn't been much going on. And so they're starved for success. And that's a good thing, right? That means that stadium's going to be electric every single game next season. So that's a good thing. Now, what to expect? Kevin, that's the hard thing. I mean, we were just kind of joking about it. I look at the team and I say, well, I like the individual pieces. I love what Prime brings to the table. I'm a big Sean Lewis and Charles Kelly guy. I like the two coordinators they've got. I think those are exciting hires for Colorado. I'm getting to know the staff, obviously. I like what Prime's done putting that together. So everything, when you look at it sitting there out in front of you, looks fantastic. I expect great things to happen for Colorado. Now, is it fair to say, well, the Buffaloes are going to be in the college football playoffs next year? To go from 1-11 and a bad 1-11 to 10-2 or 11-1, that would be unbelievable. That would blow my mind if they're able to make that kind of turnaround. That would be so extreme. I'm not sure we've seen anything like that in college football. Now, if they're bowl eligible, they get 6, 7, 8 wins and they're in there. That would be a phenomenal success when you consider where they were. If they got to 7 wins, that's a 7-fold increase from last season. And that schedule, which you know very well, is incredibly difficult, especially those first 5 games to start. So if they're able to get to 7 wins, that's an unbelievable turnaround. I think if that were to happen, I think Prime should be the National Coach of the Year for what he's done. Now, is that going to placate fans out there? Or are they going to be disappointed because they didn't go 11-1 or 10-2? I don't know. I just know it's going to be greatly improved. I can't put a number on how many wins it's going to be because I just don't know because everything's so brand new. I just think it's going to be greatly improved. It's going to be a fun season.
Yeah, even though I hate the question when people ask me how many wins, I had to ask you just because, because people ask me the same thing about Stanford, Colorado. And it's like, well, I'm looking at Colorado. I know their roster as of right now, and I'm speculating in my head who's going to start. But I don't know who's going to be there, who's going to be healthy. God forbid anybody gets injured and stuff like that. But then I look at like TCU's roster. They lost their quarterback, their best receiver, their running backs, their coordinator. And it's like, technically, Colorado did not struggle when they faced Chandler Morris last year. That was like that first half of that Colorado TCU game was a tough watch. And that was like the only game going on at that time. And everybody was watching that game. And it was a tough watch at first. And then Max Duggan came in and kind of started clicking for TCU. But there's just so much unknown going into the season. So it's hard to answer that, what to expect. I do want to dive back into something you talked about. It's spring and the fans and one of the week 2. And I'm sure you know what game already I'm talking to. The schedule, me and you, we got to memorize. But if you don't know, that is week 2 versus Nebraska, first home game of the Coach Prime era. And I kind of joked about it yesterday in one of my articles because Coach Prime obviously went viral, which I think he said this a few weeks ago. And then ESPN picked it up like 2 days ago, the jersey number thing. Yep. And everybody started going crazy with the earn the jersey thing. And I'm like, we knew this, but okay, we're back to the jersey thing. I was like, I'm sure people have numbers already. But Matt Rule came out and said, I think it was yesterday, the day before, similar policy. Numbers 0 through 9, even though Coach Prime doesn't do number 0 through 9 need to be the guys in Nebraska's case that best represent the Cornhuskers or whatever he said. And so it kind of made me laugh that these two programs, they're rivals. The coaches, very different upbringings. Coach Prime was like he said, all-time athlete, dabbled in the media, dabbled in reality TV at one point. And now he went to high school coaching in Texas, had success. And then he went to Jackson State. Matt Rule's been in the college game from, I feel like, my whole life, whether it be in an analyst role. So just talk about how the difference in these rivals in that week 2 matchup, because I feel like that's one that everybody's really keying in on in the early part of the season.
Well, I've said only half jokingly, we're going to celebrate the 100th year of Folsom Field in 2023. And Nebraska coming in, that second game of the season may blow the building apart. I mean, I'm not sure it can contain, the energy that's going to happen inside that building. Colorado and Nebraska anytime. When the two teams in recent years here were not good, the place was insane, right? When we won, Laviska Shenault has the great catch in Lincoln, win that game, come back here the next year and end up winning that game. I mean, the building was just nuts at those two ball games. I can't imagine what it's going to be like because listen, one thing we know about Nebraska fans, they are insane for their team, right? I mean, that is it in the state of I hunt out Nebraska all the time. I get a lot of comments when people find out what I do for a living. I take a lot of back and forth with the fans there. I mean, they're just out of their minds for it. And now you bring in Matt Rule, and so yeah, right, exactly. They're just over the top right now. What Matt Rule's going to bring them back, and it's going to be big red and glory again. Like it was 20 years ago. And then, of course, we've been talking about what's going on with Colorado. So I think the atmosphere is just going to be unbelievable. We expect probably game day or someone's going to be here to have that'll be a national broadcast that day. And I'm just excited about it. And a lot of CU fans dropped me a line when Matt Rule made his comment about, the single-digit numbers. I don't think he's copying Coach Prime. Making teams earn numbers is not a unique idea. It's been around forever. But it's a great way of getting players in the mindset you have to earn things or it's not going to give them to you. So a lot was made out of that, which I don't think that was that big a deal. But it is interesting because both these guys are dynamic personalities. Matt Rule's had great success as well, at Temple and Baylor, and he's a very good football coach. And so there should be expectation, excitement on the Nebraska side. I just can't wait to be part of it that day and you see what unfolds. And let's hope the Buffs now make it 3 games in a row against Nebraska.
Yeah, that would be a big deal for Colorado fans. And the other thing about the Matt Rule jersey thing too, because a lot of people, I quote tweeted it and I jokingly was like, this seems familiar. But Matt Rule he'd been doing that since Temple, which was later clarified by one of the reporters. And the numbers thing, which it kind of made me laugh because that used to be like a really big deal in football. It was like you don't get to just show up and be like, I'm number 2, I'm number 3's my number. That used to be like reserved for like you earn that number. LSU is a program that still I think is famous for that. They're number 7. Number 7 is usually their guy. They pick their number 7, and so it kind of made me laugh that there was like all this spectacle about Coach Prime and even Matt Rule making people work for their numbers. It's like that used to be a common thing. You didn't just show up and be like, I'm a 5-star recruit. I want number 10 and I will take that in a medium. That wasn't a thing back then. And so
Kevin, when I came to Colorado from Syracuse, I was out there and called the national championship with Carmelo Anthony, I grew. In Syracuse football, number 44 is their number, for example. Okay. Jim Brown wore it. Ernie Davis wore that number. I mean, there have been great run. Floyd Little, who, of course, is one of the original Denver Broncos, wore that number. I mean, that's a number of honor. And so a lot of programs have that, a certain number because of their history that's become special for them. And so that's why when Prime sent him, like, that's why he talked about it. He didn't say it was his unique idea. He said, I'm old school. This is the way it used to work. So it's been around for a long time. You've got to earn the right to have certain numbers or even get your number. I mean, there have been basketball and football coaches who have taken, the jerseys, made them wear an off-colored jersey and said, you got to earn your said school jersey in order to play for this program. And so I like that concept. It is a bit old school, and so I kind of like that.
Do you think Coach Prime has any Coach Krzyzewski in him when Duke struggles and he kind of takes away all their Duke gear? Will there be a point in the season where Colorado players are walking around in plain black tees or plain gray T-shirts because Coach Prime took away the gear?
You never know. I mean, he's so old school. Maybe that happens. Other coaches have taken locker rooms away. You didn't play well. You weren't allowed to dress in the locker room. So the guys would be, getting dressed in the hallways and stuff. They've got to earn the locker room back. So, that motivational kind of thing, I think, works pretty well. And it teaches you, listen, we can't just come here and there's not an entitlement to this. Mm-hmm. We have to earn our position, what we have, all the amenities we have. And I think that's a good thing for not just athletes, for anybody, really.
Yeah. And before we go, Mark, I appreciate you joining us today. I have one question about you. Okay. Yeah. And I want to know, obviously, Carl Durrell gets let go. You never want to see anybody get let go. It's the unfortunate part of our business. I covered it with David Shaw. He didn't get let go, but he stepped down. One of those kind of leaving the hand, passing the torch things. Yep. Either way, you never want to see someone lose their job. But Colorado's going through this hiring process. You've been there for 19, going on 20 years in August, you said. I know Coach Prime was linked to Colorado at first, but he was also linked to USF. He was linked to Cincinnati. Was there a part of you that was like, please, Coach Prime, come to Boulder? Like, how excited were you that you get to cover, because it's a whole new program. I don't think people don't realize like it's changed. Athlon literally asked me to cover Colorado, and that's all I focus on for Athlon. Locked On Network asked me to do a Colorado podcast. Even game day is going to be at probably the TCU game. Week 2 is going to be tough because they got Texas, Alabama again. And I feel like that's going to be a tough competitor, but I know week 1, they have a good chance. There's just so much difference in Boulder. And so give me a little insight as to your thought process during that hiring process.
Well, you got to remember, after being here this long and loving this program like I do, and I've gone through way too many coaching changes here. I mean, it's ridiculous how many coaches that I've seen come and go since I've been here through 19 seasons. So for me, number one, all I want is, for goodness sake, hire somebody good. Let's get this program back on track. And then when you hear the Deion Sanders name come up, and they're like, well, Coach Prime, I hadn't really thought about that. And my initial reaction is, well, I don't understand the connection there, right? He grew up down south in the Southeast. He played mainly down south. Yes, he was with the 49ers, but mainly he was a Southern guy. He's coaching right now in the South. I thought, I don't understand the connection. It doesn't, like a lot of people, you try and draw. The way it works. Whenever there's a coaching change, you're looking at how do you connect the dots here? Right. Had they come through as an assistant? Do they have history in this conference? If they have a connection, right? Yeah. They have a connection with the athletic director, whatever it might be. And I kept thinking, I don't see that. But then, in my position, as I'm nosing around a little bit, I was told basically, this is legit. I mean, it's real. It could happen. We're trying to get things done. And so now I'm keeping my mouth shut. I mean, everyone was so shocked when the announcement came out. Basically 2 weeks ahead of that, I was told, listen, this is legit, and it's probably going to happen. And so I'm kind of biting my tongue thinking how exciting this could be, because I realized, just like we talked about to start out the podcast, what was going to come along with it. Now, did I expect what it actually is? No. I never envisioned the amount of attention it was going to garner, but I knew it would be enormous, and it would alter the program and really kind of change the trajectory of it. So, yeah, I was really kind of tickled about it right off the top. And now that he's here, and, it's even bigger and better than I actually expected.
Yeah, it definitely, I heard Colorado, and like in my initial response, just as not as someone who covers the sport, just as a fan of the sport, I was like, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders of Colorado. I was like, he didn't play for the Broncos. I was like, I don't think he played for the Rockies when he played in the MLB. I was like, I don't see it. I was like, it snows there. That's like my instant reaction every time people, especially people from Colorado, I don't think they realize how, even if your winters aren't cold to you guys, the snow is a big deterrent to a lot of people. I lived in Connecticut for a year. It practically was the death of me. I was out there shoveling snow to get off my car, and I thought I was not going to make it. And so the snow could be a big deterrent. And I was like, he's from South Florida. Why would he go to why would he go where it snows? Like, he's not used to the snow, whatever. And then it was like picking up steam. And I'm like, I mean, it is the Pac-12. It is a program that could be the face of the conference eventually, with USC and UCLA leaving. I was like, oh, okay. So either way, glad he's here. Glad it brought us together, and I'm glad you were able to join us on today's episode of Locked On Buffs. We're available wherever you get your podcast. And Mark, before we depart, any final thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, that's one of the dirty little secrets about those of us who live. Now, I live up in the mountains west of Denver. I'm up quite a ways up here, but that's the dirty little secret. People watch the Broncos play on a Monday night or something, and it always seems to be snowing, and they got shots of the ski areas, up in the high country. And the reality of it, and this is what Coach Prime has learned since he got here. Yeah, it may snow, and then about 18 hours later, it's gone, and it's 45 degrees again. So it's really not that cold. And that's one thing that I think when you listen to all of his press conferences and all of his videos and the shows that he does, he reiterates that on a regular basis about, this isn't nearly what I thought it was. And that's why it's a great destination for a lot of people, for athletes, for coaches. And I think he's found that out. And Kevin, it's been an honor to join you here in your podcast. And I think we should probably talk again, because I think there's probably going to be more storylines this season with Coach Prime being here. Absolutely,
Mark. We hope to have you on almost every week during the season. We would love to have you on and just join us. Maybe talk about the Colorado snow a little more, because as someone in California, I try to avoid the snow. I did my time in Connecticut. That's what I call it, doing time. I was struggling out there. My winters are usually like 40 degrees, 30 at a minimum. It was like in the negatives out there. I was struggling, but I wasn't struggling and talking to you, Mark. It was a great time meeting you, and we will see you guys tomorrow on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Buffs. We appreciate you guys for listening. Have a great day.